Here I've got GitHub open and I'm going to show you the easiest way to make a repository and add some files to GitHub. So over here I'm logged in to my brand new repository. I've got a create repository button, so I'll just click that and I need to give it a name. So here I'm just testing things out, so I'll say testing GitHub. Now note that I can't really put spaces in there, but if I wanted multiple words I can either put them back to back or put like a dash or an underscore, something like that. I don't really need a description. Now let me see if I can make the repository private. That means that only I can see the code in there or people that I give access to. And now I know that I'm just signed into a free, most basic GitHub account here where I haven't signed up to GitHub Education. I'm not paying for GitHub Pro. And there are restrictions on what you can do in terms of how many public and private repositories and what you can do with them. So let's just start out and just see what it looks like. I'm trying to make a private repository. And this is what I normally do. I start with a private repository, work on my project with collaborators or by myself. Now when it's ready, you can flick a switch to make it public later very easily. So that's how I recommend to begin. Let's see, initialize the repository with a README file. Yeah, I'll click this on. That just creates a empty file, which later you'll add some information into this README file to describe what is even going on inside the repository. I don't need a license for this. I'll just hit create repository. Okay, now this is what it looks like. It's private. So someone who had this URL who was not logged in as myself, they wouldn't be able to see this. So yeah, that's slow. Let's try. Yeah, okay. So you just get a 404 error if you weren't logged in. So that's proving that this really is a private repository. Now, how do we add some files? Let me close that one. I've got in Visual Studio Code 2 Python files. So these are both living on my desktop at the moment. A Python file and a Jupyter notebook. So the Python file, very basic, and the Jupyter notebook has some outputs in them. So I'm curious to see if GitHub will display, say, the math in these data frames correctly. Now if we go back, let's see, to add files, there's a big button up here where we can upload some files. Or let's be dangerous, right? I'll just grab hello.py. Okay, that doesn't look like it's working. Ignore that. Let's go back to add file, upload files. Okay, now we can drag and drop them. And we grab those two files, drag them over the rectangle and let go. Now that'll upload both of them into one bundle of changes. Now GitHub calls this commit. So one bundle of changes. There can be new files being added, can be files being deleted, files being edited. Now the great thing about Git is that it kind of forces you to structure a history, like a story for your code, a narrative over time. So here, if we were fixing some bug, we would type in a message here saying fixed the mega bad bug in the blah file or something. You write a short message called the commit message. They have to be less than about 70 characters, I think, so kind of like a little tweet. Or here we're just adding some files. So we're adding hello.py and test Jupyter notebook. commit to the main branch. Yep, that's fine. Hit commit changes. Okay, now the code we previously just had on our computer has now been backed up and stored in the repository, which is our GitHub repository. I can click on this code now and see with some bit of highlighting the Python code that I wrote, and let's test if the notebook looks good. Oh, and even the notebook renders nicely. We can see the outputs and the tables that were shown locally in our notebook pop up in the GitHub repository. So GitHub didn't used to have that functionality, so I'm still appreciating the new things that GitHub adds. So that's the easiest way to add code, but let's say we made some edits. Okay, I changed, let's say I add some lines of code here. So I add in my AI slop version of the isPrime function, save it. Now I've got a different version of the code here locally on my Mac than I do on the repository. So let's see if we can upload again. It's hello.py. Now the change would be adding a isPrime function. And if we commit that to the main branch, we'll hit commit. Now we can see that this has been updated. Now the commit message shows the newest commit message. If I click on that, I get the new full version of the code. And then sometimes it's quite neat to look at this here. So that button, that was a bit quick, sorry. This button here is a link to all the commits that were made in the history of the repository. So if I click on that, I can see the name of the different commits, when they have, who authored them, when they happened. If I click on one of them, say the most recent one, what it will do is show me the difference between the different versions that we have. So this part in red was deleted, this part in green was added. Okay, get rid of that. So this is very helpful to keep track of what's changing in a large project over time. I typically look at these diffs, they're called DIFFs, the differences, before uploading them to GitHub, just to make sure I'm not accidentally adding something that I don't want to be online, or deleting something that's meaningful that I later have to fix. Now, if we wanted to make this publicly available, let's see how to do that. There's a settings button here, which is settings for this repository. And where is it? I think down the bottom somewhere. Okay, in the danger zone, we can change the visibility of the project. So if we change it to be a publicly available project, that means that anyone stumbling across this part of the internet can see the code, they can copy it, make their own copy of it, that's what forking is, and they can see all the history associated. So all those commit messages I wrote, don't put anything embarrassing in there, because that will become public if you make the whole repository public. You click on this, make it public, and then if we go back, the repository is public. If I take this link and open it in some other browser, where I'm not logged into GitHub, then I can get the code. If I wanted to download it, there's a couple of ways to do it. There's a big code button, and then there's a download zip button. It's probably the simplest way. If you were sending this to someone and you wanted to see all the code that they had, you can download it as a zip like that. There are other ways as well, but that's perhaps the simplest way. Now, you've seen in this video. The simplest way to make a repository, to add files, to edit files. Oh, okay, one last thing I can show you. So if I click on, say, this hello.py, it is possible somehow to edit this file directly in the website. So you edit this file, and maybe I could say, add in an example here. So I say I want to add that new line in, I can commit those changes directly inside the website. Now, I really don't recommend doing this because it's very easy to make mistakes doing this. I would only do this if I had maybe in that README file, if I had some documentation, I had a typo or something, I just quickly go edit, fix the typo, and commit the change. So here, commit the change. That's the only time in which I would consider doing this. So yeah, update to hello.py is now in the history here in the git log. But it is a very simple way to edit the code. Right? So if you don't want to drag and drop. If you're using GitHub more in a longer term way, your projects are getting bigger. Each time you're making changes, it's hitting many files at once, or maybe you're using GitHub to actually display a website for you, which is what I do for actually all my websites are through GitHub. So my personal website, the AI course that I create, that's actually shown is a website that is hosted by GitHub in the background, and the code is on GitHub as well. Then if you are starting to get these larger repositories where you've got lots of files, lots of changes and a long history, there's no way that I would actually use these methods that I just showed you in this video. I personally never even used this upload files thing in my life. Just today for this video, for the first time using it. But to set up let's say the more traditional hacker kind of way of interacting with GitHub using git pull, git push, it takes a bit of setup. So I'll leave that for a separate recording to show you.